What's going on, everybody? Strike City DMV here to give you a tournament recap. Um, Last year, I got actually a lot of inquiries to try to do a tournament recap. A lot of you out there just getting into tournament fishing, or you've been in tournament fishing, and the reviews of the different lakes and river systems, information that we share with each other helps each other become better anglers. I actually look at a lot of reviews. I'm a research nut, as all of you know. I spend countless number of hours throughout the week in between my many other projects just doing research before I even touch a lure, touch any type of anything. But this recap is going to be a recap of the FLW BFL Stop 1 in the Shenandoah division, which is on Smith Mountain Lake. So let's get into it. So Smith Mountain Lake, which is in Huddleston, Virginia, not too far from Liberty University in the mountain region. A lot of the college teams up in that area, Liberty, Virginia Tech, they fish that area a lot. So and also it's an Elite Series stop. A lot of you may remember Skeet Reese just destroying it probably about 8 years or so ago, 7 years ago, with the swim bait. But for me, this year, Smith Mountain was a little bit different. I grew up in the Southern Virginia area. The Chick and the James is my home river systems. I fished Smith Mountain Lake before, in my teens. Never forgot that experience. Once I went into the Marines and left, I haven't fished it in a long time, but I still remember, what type of fishery it is. So this year, Smith Mountain Lake was a little bit different. The weather, as you know, if you live anywhere in Maryland, D.C., Virginia area, has been really crazy. It's been literally 70 one day or 65 one day, and it snowed. We get like an inch and a half, 2 inches of snow the next. So that type of inconsistent weather has really been messing the fish up. For the most part, or by and large, we've had a very mild winter. We haven't gotten 10 inches of snow the entire year. I don't even think we've gotten 8 inches of snow, to be honest with you. But it has been rather inconsistent. Warm, hot, cold, freezing, snow, rain, hot. It's been all over the place. So that really affected Smith Mountain Lake. Last week in a English Choice, I had a buddy that killed it. They had about 20 pounds, I want to say, by noon, with a 7-pounder. Plus probably, I think it was like 729. He had a monster, and that turned him a big fish. And then something happened to his boat. Things happen, tournaments. God knows I know all about it, and he wasn't able to weigh in. But because of that inconsistent weather, the fish were very skittish. I didn't get a chance to practice as much this time around, but that's fine. We got out there. We got there pretty late on Friday, 3 hours of practice, if that. So what I saw in those 3 hours was that the water was still cold. I didn't see a lot of people catching. People caught fish, but I didn't see a lot of people catching. They were not on docks at all, from what I could see, and that was pretty much all I gained from that. The Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday leading up to the tournament was the nighttime temperature was in the 20s, like 25, 28, 29 degree range, which will destroy fishing, absolutely destroy it. And the week prior, they had 50s and up, 50s and 60s in some days, and the fish were all over the place. The tournament numbers were up. 20 pound, 23 pound bags was winning tournaments. 21 6-pounders was weighed the week prior. And this weekend, there was 1 7 and a 5. and I think and there was a four and a bunch of threes, but it was a big difference. So this is what happened when I was on the water and what I observed. We got on the water first off. I was flight 1, 4th boat. Boom, take off. We fished predominantly the black water region of Smith Mountain Lake. I was told by my boater that we're gonna get on a natural rock pattern and riprap. It's fine with me. I fished them all, so that's fine. That's one of my strong points anyway. But the thing about it was the water temperature was 45 degrees. My boater, although he was a great guy, he wasn't fishing it right. He didn't have a clue in my mind. He had his foot on that trolling motor and he was just rolling through. We were not being efficient. We were fishing way too fast for 45-degree water temperature. First off, when it's cold, you have to slow down, and then when you think you're going too slow, you need to slow down even more. So in my mind, we were leaving fish. He was throwing the spinner bait, he was throwing crankbaits, he was burning it, and I'm just out. In my hand, I got a drop shot, and I couldn't get into any type of rhythm with my drop shot because as soon as it hit the water, by the time I about to shake it a little bit, I can feel the trolling motor just pulling it. It's just pulling my drop shot. So I could never really get into it like that. So I was just chunking the spinner bait, trying to slow roll it. But at one point, it didn't even do me any good to reeling it because I knew I was reeling it too fast because of how fast the boat was going. So I just threw my spinner bait out there, reeled up a decent amount of line, and I just let the trolling motor pull me along with my lure in the water because we were just moving way too fast. And finally, a couple hours went by that I just couldn't take it anymore, and I tried to be as respectful as I could. And I said, hey, I'm not gonna say his name, but I said, hey, I'm just gonna say boater. I think we're moving a little too fast. And he was like, really? My trolling motor is on like 50 or 40 or whatever it was on. And I was like, yeah, I think we're just moving too fast. So and to his respect, he did slow down a little bit, but he slowed down a little bit, but it was still not slow like we should have been slow. It wasn't efficient slow. So finally, it's around 11ish. We roll over to his boater, or not his boater. We roll over to one of his friends. We're coming through a creek, and he sees one of his friends, and his friend is clearly 4 to 5 feet off the bank, and he's flipping. It looks like I see him flipping, which is what I expect when the water is cold. Now, gradually, as the day went on, the water temperature climbed, which is a good thing, which is what I expected it, because the high was supposed to be right around 59 to 60, and the water temperature was going to climb to 50. So in my mind, the action was going to take place from noon on, unless you just slowed down and you got some onesie twosies here and there. So as we idled over to his friend basically said, yeah, I got a limit. And he was like, really? He was like, but his friend also said, I have to slow down, tremendously. His friend said, I can't get him on a moving bite. I can't get him to look at it. He said I had one bite on a jerk bait, but a small nibble bite. I don't know if it came off or shook off, but he said I had one bite on the jerk bait first thing in the morning, and that was it. After that, it was just cruising, covering water, flipping the jig, and he caught all his keepers. He caught everything he caught on a jig. So finally, with me telling him to slow down, and his friend, that he respects a lot, confirming it, we finally slowed down to what was considered, adequate for that time of year fishing with that type of water temperature. By almost close to noon, 11ish, whatever, the water temperature hadn't quite hit 50 yet. It was close. It was like 48.6. I think I was marking on his graph. but still needed to slow down. So we proceeded to slow down. I had 2 jigs tied on. I'll show you in a few. I had 2 jigs tied on, 2 different rods, and I also had a spinnerbait and a drop shot. That's pretty much all I had for the most part. So we go down a bank. The fish were really skittish, really skittish. So I changed to a Terminator jig, and let me grab it for you real quick. Yeah. Grab these three rods really quick for you. Alrighty. So the first jig that I was throwing is my go-to jig. It's a hand-tied jig, black and brown, as you can see, with a green pumpkin Riot Baits Fuzzy Beaver trailer, arky head style of jig head, half ounce in weight. This is my go-to bait. Many a big fish have been caught on this. Again, this is a half-ounce hand-tied jig, Riot Baits, green pumpkin Fuzzy Beaver trailer. And the magic in this jig, half-ounce jig, is I have this is a rubber skirt. This rubber skirt gives them a different type of action. Normally, when they're extremely skittish like this, that rubber skirt normally is the deal. And I didn't get bit off of it. Unfortunately, I didn't. I felt like I got maybe something nipped at it, but who knows? I didn't get bit off it. Normally I do. That's money. And I think because I threw it in the morning a lot. Even though we were going fast, I tried to throw it. I just couldn't get into a zone with it. Couldn't get into my drop shot. But once we slowed down after his friend told him that we need to slow down, and I realized they're super skittish. So I started to think, what can I do to get more bites? So I switched to a jig with a rattle on it. So I went to a half-ounce green pumpkin and blue back. I'm sorry, yeah, green pumpkin with a little bit of blue in the skirt. Terminator jig, has a rattle on it, and I went with a the trailer is a Missile Baits D-Bomb in the Superbug color. The Superbug color is unique because one side of it is that blue black fleck, and the other side is green pumpkin, and it matches this one to the T. It matches it to the T, and it's got a rattle. So what I did was we were focusing in on 6 feet or less. The boat was sitting in 10 to 12 feet of water. We were throwing to 5 and 6 feet. I was throwing it actually closer to the bank, which is probably about 2 feet, 1 feet, and I could see it, in the water, in between the rocks, and I was dragging it back to the boat. And once it got to about that 5 feet range, that's when they would pick it up. And what happened when I caught my keeper bass, it was about a 3-pound bass. I caught it doing that. I threw it into the shallows, and what was happening was around that time, it was probably around 1-ish. Water temperature had heated up to like 50.8 degrees. Fish were starting to become active a little bit. They were on the move, coming up from deeper water to come into the shallows to get some sun. And that's basically it. His friend said he caught all of his fish on a jig in the shallows, and that's what we were doing. We were primarily patterning shallow rock in that 3 to 5 feet off the bank range and 6 feet or less. I got bit, then later on he got bit. It was a short, so we had to throw it back, but that's how he got bit. And it was, in a tournament like that, you have to just really hunker down and do something you don't want to do. And a lot of people aren't disciplined enough to fish the jig. because it's not a sexy bait. You're not throwing it out there. It's not buzzing off the top. It's not rattling. It's not vibrating. It's a jig. It's mano y mano type stuff. You throw it out there, you drag it along, and it's not sexy, and it's a grind. But the reward is you're gonna catch bigger fish, and it's gonna be what you need for a tournament. So that's pretty much what we did. My boater's boat broke down, as you saw in my Instagram post. My boater's boat broke down like 3 times right before the weigh-in. Throughout the day, it kind of like choked up a few times, and I was kind of like, oh God, I got another one of those, because I've broken down on the James, and we had to get towed in 95-degree weather, and I had one fish shy of a limit, and I would have had a top 5, and I might have had big fish, and I had to dump all of my fish before, not knowing. So I've had that happen, and I thought it was complete fluke, and now this year it happens again in the first tournament, and I'm like, yo, what are the chances of that? So needless to say, I'm not happy. I'm in the process of writing a letter to FLW, and I'm talking to the tournament director to see what can be done. They may even give me my points back. I don't know. I'll let you guys know, but I am speaking to the tournament director and writing a letter, because as a co-angler, you shouldn't be penalized if your boater's boat is trash. I don't have any control over that. I know I can fish, but I can't control some things. I just can't control, and I can't control somebody else's boat. He was a great guy. I don't want to take anything from him. Great guy, very respectful, but that's not gonna cut it when it comes to fishing. But if you go to Smith Mountain Lake, I'm always gonna have tied on 2 jigs, a spin, and a spinner bait. For me, that's the only type. That's all you really need. Especially that time of year, this time of year. Spinnerbait is a classic pre-spawn bait, and the jig is a staple on Smith Mountain Lake where it's rocks. I also had a shaky head. I tried a shaky head because that's something else that's a staple in rocky areas, but I just couldn't get a bite on it. The jig seemed to be the ticket for what we were doing and where I was at. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If anybody have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out to me, YouTube, Instagram, direct message, how you've been doing. Last but not least, I'm just going to give you a quick tip on the jig. A lot of people have been, I see people fishing the jig incorrectly. I see all type of stuff, and I want to explain to you how to properly fish the jig. If you're hopping your jig off the bottom all crazy and that type of stuff, let me just say that's not the proper way to fish the jig. If you want to catch more fish fishing the jig, and I would suggest going to your local pond, river, any area that has a lot of rocks, and just take one rod. This is what I did to really learn how to fish a jig. Take one rod, so you're forced just to fish that one rod, because if you take 2 rods and you don't get a bite within an hour, you're gonna stop fishing the jig. You might even stop within the first 30 minutes and fish something else. It's very fun and sexy to fish it, it's very fun and sexy to fish with moving baits. It's not sexy to fish with this thing. Secondly, with the jig, a jig is to me, you throw your jig out there, and it's all about bottom contact with the jig. You want to keep bottom contact consistently all the way throughout your cast back to the boat. If you're hopping it, you're taking your bait, in my opinion, out of the strike zone. Bass are on the bottom. It's a bottom bait. They're on the bottom. If you're hopping it over them, if they're lethargic, they'll see it. I've seen it to where you've hop it. Say this is the bass, you can hop your jig right over top of the bass and it doesn't even affect him. He's not going to turn, he's not going to chase it, because he's just not in that type of mood. When they're down a lot deep and they're on the bottom like that, they're lethargic. But if the bass is here and you're dragging it, or turning to the side, this is his nose. You're dragging it. Now you're nose to nose. Now, and it's just sitting there in front of him. You shake it a little bit, and I've got that rattle in it. He's probably going to eat it. But if you're hopping it, and you hop it over top of him, you know, he's not going to turn. You know, if he's lethargic, he's just not going to do it. So drag that jig, drag it and drag it. When you get this jig back, you know, like I've got chips all, I don't know if you can see it, I've got chips, I've got dents, all on the side of this thing. Paint is missing. Like, when you get your jig head back, one of the tips to know that you're fishing that jig correctly, if that jig is bald and got chips from all the rocks that you dragged it over top of, you're fishing that jig right. If the paint is all missing, you're fishing that jig right. If that jig is shiny and got his fresh coat of paint on the head of that jig, you're not fishing it right. That bait is designed to be dragged along the bottom. Try it next time when you're out there in the water. Just keep dragging that bait along the bottom instead of as many hops. I use the bait as a search tool. I can tell whether it's pea gravel on the bottom. I can tell whether it's bigger, more chunkier rock. And what I do is this is mimicking a crawfish. This bait is supposed to mimic a crawfish. Crawfish don't hop up consistently. They crawl. That's why you drag it. They crawl. So when you're crawling the bait and you feel a rock, slowly crawl it over top of it. You can hop it a little bit, but not nothing too crazy, not nothing too eccentric. Just crawl it over the rock and let it scurry away. That's when a bass is going to eat it. Most of the time he's going to eat it when you're crawling. But not to get too deep into it, that's pretty much what I did. Again, I had a drop shot tied on. Didn't get any action on that. I'll just go over my setup real quick on these three. So I always go with a heavy section. This is what I do for the heavy stuff. If I'm flipping in the cover, I have a 7'4" medium heavy Ardent Pro Series. This is the Denny Brower flipping rod. I've got 20-pound Seaguar and Vizex on this particular one. All right. And this is for me when I'm flipping into like heavier brush and trees and stuff like that. Then I have a more I don't want to say a stealthier presentation, but then this is my other one other rod that I use. I have a Lew's speed stick, TP1 speed stick, Lew's Tournament MB 751 gear ratio reel, and on this one I have 15 pound Seaguar Tatsu. I can't remember. It's 15. I thought it was 17. No, but it's 15 pound Seaguar Tatsu on this line, and I fished that one. And this is a 7-foot medium heavy, by the way. This is my other jig rod that I like fishing with. It's a little bit lighter, 7-foot range. I get good hookups out of this medium heavy setup. And my next spinnerbait setup is a Lew's TP1 speed stick, and I've got the Lew's BB1 a little bit wider spool. A lot of people use it for cranking. I use this rod for cranking in my spinnerbaits, so that's why I got the BB1 up there. 641 gear ratio reel, and I use a Riot Baits R1 spinnerbait. This is a 1/2 ounce model, chartreuse with pearl, and it's a gold and gold willow leaf. It's a double willow leaf. One is gold, one is silver, and I just got a regular Eagle Claw Trocar trailer hook on it. Always have a trailer hook on my spinnerbaits in tournament fishing. And that's pretty much it. So hope you enjoyed the review. Next stop is the gosh, I can't even think. The next stop for me on the BFL trail is going to be another rock area, which is Kerr Lake, aka Bugs Island. Fished that a lot too. It's in the same pretty much region of the Virginia area that I fished a lot of experience there. Same type of deal. I'm thinking, same type of deal. Jig rods will be in effect Then this weekend I have an ABA Ram Open on the Potomac. Totally different beast. Reviews coming. Thank you again. Tight lines.